How long have you listened to my stuff on the radio?
Quite a while. I mean, so my show's been going on for 4 years, and I've definitely listened for about a year before that. So
Yeah.
at least 5 years, I'd say. And probably a little bit here and there prior to that, but I wasn't, religious about it. But definitely since I started the show, sort of, because I mean, you're like I said, you've always been sort of an inspiration in that end. I've
Well,
tried to pay attention to what you do, how you've built your audience and all those things. So I find it inspirational. And I mean, that's one of the things to doing things right is finding someone else that's already sort of done it and try to mimic, right? Why reinvent the wheel?
There's no point. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, and I think creation is overrated.
Yeah.
At some point, some people have done it, and you look at something that may speak to you, and then you just build on that. I mean, I think that the sharing of information, the sharing of ideas, and the sharing of processes is something that we do so well in the business, but we don't do this when it comes to intellectual property. We always want to start it from the ground. We want to be the pioneers, and
Yeah.
at the end of it all, and believe it or not, when I moved to Canada, I couldn't speak English, and I decided to teach myself how to speak English by reading the newspaper. At the time, it was the Toronto Star, and by listening. At the time, was CFRB 1010, and I'll never forget. There was a guy by the name of Ed Needham. I don't know if you've ever heard of this person
No.
before.
No.
He was crazy. I remember this. People would call him out and ask him questions. I don't know about what.
Yeah.
And he would often just hang up on people. Says, "My show. I have the ultimate control," and for me, that was very appealing.
Yeah.
But for me, the show has been a catalyst on my development as a human, on my development as a professional,
Yeah.
as a dad, as a man. It's been amazing. I don't know what kind of effect this had on you to have that kind of a platform and that sort of responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible experience for sure. Before we go on to my stuff, I want, just for listeners who may not know, that you
Yeah.
host the Greg Carrasco Show, which airs 8 o'clock to 11 a.m. Saturdays on Global News Radio, AM 640 Toronto. You've been doing the show for, what, 13 years?
It's been 13 years, and
Yeah.
we've moved a little bit onto TV.
Yeah.
So the Greg Carrasco show on global television has been on. Now, I decided to put it on pause because, unlike radio, which is pretty dynamic, that you can, it's live. We
Yeah.
do live radio. TV, we were recording the programs about 2 or 3 weeks prior to them airing, and I didn't want to go to the public at a national level with information that was 3 weeks old.
Right.
And because of the social distancing, I couldn't get the camera crew to come down the day before of the show and record it. It wasn't the wise thing to do. So for the time being, the global version of the Carrasco Show has been paused.
Yeah.
And but it's been 13 years on air. Social media, I was an early adopter, and we have been able to grow this large number of people that seem to identify with what I'm saying, and it's very humbling for me.
Yeah, and I mean, your show is definitely, it's the largest automotive show across the country for sure, and probably the most popular. But you don't only just talk about that stuff. You're so much more diverse than just the car industry.
You're absolutely right. The show has evolved into something that I never dreamed of. To be perfectly honest with you, I have never been a car guy.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Canada, and with my inability to speak English at the time, I spent some time with the Canadian Armed Forces, and I was unemployed after that. So for me, it was a job. I knew that I liked people. I was a student of humans. I've always had this desire to understand human behavior. I was good with numbers, but I wasn't a businessman, to say the least. And vehicles just happened to be, no pun intended, the vehicle that I used to push this forward.
Yeah.
But cars are pretty boring to me. I never really liked cars per se, to be perfectly honest. I've only bought one car in my entire life.
Wow.
And I regretted that. So no, but the show is quite broader. I mean, my personal interest is certainly philosophy and politics.
Yeah.
Literature, by and large, is something that has captivated my attention from a very, very young age. and the fact that like-minded people tune into the show on Saturday mornings is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's really resonated with you and I, and where we've developed a friendship, I would say. And I mean, I thank you a lot for the things you've done for me. You've had me on your show before my show starts countless times to sort of get people staying tuned to listen to me. You give me a shout out all the time. You ask me for my opinion. So I've always appreciated that. And I think you're right. When you can find like-minded people to share in on something, I think that's where a lot of magic can happen. And it's interesting what you say about, and you say that all the time about you're not a fan of cars. Really, you see cars as the practicality of getting from point A to point B. And in fact, one of the things you speak about on your show all the time is that people really shouldn't extend themselves more than they have to for these types of things. And it's interesting because one of the things, obviously being a healthcare related show with what I do, and mainly therapy and rehabilitation and those things, I'm often trying to tell people that a lot of this stuff is stuff that you can do yourself if you take care of yourself. So it seems counterintuitive, I think, when people listen to us and they hear someone like you really not trying to oversell them, and someone like me also equally not trying to oversell them. We have a similar, I think, philosophy in that sense.
I think that the community, the populace is starving from just real conversation, Lou.
Yeah.
The truth is this, that the car industry for 120 years hasn't been the most forthcoming industry. There is a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of information that was held back, and that allowed dealerships to have an unusual power over people. And when I started to do this, I felt, guys, there is nothing to hide here.
Yeah.
And if you do have something to hide, you shouldn't be in business, because then this is not a customer that you are bringing in. You're bringing in a victim, that you hide information and you're relying on their lack of that information in order for you to conduct a transaction. In other words, I never really believed in the word sales, like selling. Selling implies that you are going to convince someone to do something that they weren't going to do in the first place. So you are using a mind trick to put them in a different state.
Right.
The idea behind it, Lou, was just more logic. If you can logic your way into a decision, there are no repercussions at the end. There is no buyer's remorse, because it makes sense. Yeah. So I wanted to show people that there were other ways of looking at automotive, instead of the passionate, this is me, this is my identity. And you got to remember, Lou, that marketing companies and actually car manufacturers, for that matter, have spent, I would say, billions of dollars in marketing, advertising an idea, because they promise, that's all a brand is. It's a promise of something. Right. And I was completely against that model, and I've been trying to change it ever since.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point. I think one of the things where people are going to want to come see you, I mean, if someone doesn't need a car, I highly doubt that anything's going to convince them to buy a car. But if someone does need a car, I think what they're looking for is someone that they can hear, that they can trust, and they can turn around and say, well, I need a car anyways. Why not go to this guy that sounds like he knows exactly what he's talking about? And that's sort of, I think, the right way to do, like what you said, sales has this implication where you're almost trying to give them something that they didn't want anyways. But really, there's a bunch of people that need that anyways, and are just going to look for the right person to give it to them.
Well, and that's the plan. The plan is, and I'm sure that you've heard this on the show many times. And the only moral compass that I had, and I'm going to digress here for 30 seconds. I remember when this show was about to become a thing, and I called my mom, who still lives in Chile, and I said, Mom, I'm terrified. What if I say something wrong? What if I give somebody the wrong advice?
Right.
And it was my mom, the one that said, why don't you think that every caller is me? Like, would you ever give me the wrong advice? And I thought, that's fucking brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's the only moral compass that I'm going to use for the rest of my career on radio. Is the only moral compass that I need. Right. And believe it or not, that fundamental principle has kept me out of trouble for 13 years. I mean, and knock on wood, people are tuning in by the tens of thousands now, Lou. It's fascinating.
Did you, when you first started, what was sort of, like, how did it happen? Did you contact them? They were looking for something like that? What was sort of the early story of the Carrasco Show?
What happened is that this is back in, I don't know, in the early 2000s. I was invited to, I can't remember, somebody had me on, either it was a newscast, and they asked me something about an unknown topic at this point. I mean, it's lost in the sea
Yeah.
of time. And somebody thought I was funny. Somebody thought it was like, oh, this is not an unusual advice.
Right.
And I remember my sales rep at the time, was Susanna Terry, who is a very dear friend of mine, said to me, why don't you consider doing an expert hour? And
Right.
back then it was only 1 hour a month. So there wasn't a lot of continuity, there wasn't a lot of repetition and presence on the radio. But what started as an hour a month, then it turned into an hour a week. Then it was 2 hours a week, and now it's 3 hours a week. Another half hour on TV. It's just grown to be what it is right now. But I decided a long time ago, Lou, that my show is the largest automotive radio show in the country that is not about cars.
Yeah.
I will answer car questions, but I don't want to talk about cars. They're boring.
Yeah.
I think that more and more people are trying to come to the understanding that nobody should want a car. I want to remove that want, Lou. And I know it's crazy. I don't have a lot of friends in the automotive industry because I'm constantly telling people that cars are a waste of money, and they truly, genuinely are if you're using them for anything more than taking them from home to where you need to be a little bit quicker and safer, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting for me. And it's funny because when I listen to your show, so many, of course, people call with car questions, but so many people will call just to even say thank you for motivating them, that they wake up on Saturday mornings to hear you, to give in. I mean, you talk about literature all the time. You talk about politics all the time. You talk about philosophy. I mean, it's so vast. I mean, even at points, you've had me on your show to talk about health. When it was related to your knee surgeries and stuff. So, I mean, the amount of topics you go through on that show are pretty vast.
I think that you and I can agree on this wholeheartedly, Lou. Men in general, we don't do a good job with support systems. You see, I believe that if there is any real patriarchal hierarchy that, if you will, has been more detrimental to man than advantageous, in the sense that, and I will explain this, men have been bred to not seek for help.
Yeah.
Men have been bred to figure things out. We are expected to perform. We are expected to provide. We are expected to defend. We are expected to figure shit out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our life could be falling apart. And, we run companies, and the moment that you say, I'm overwhelmed by this, I'm having a terrible thing, hypothetically speaking, my marriage is breaking down at home. I'm an emotional mess and I need some help. But the moment you say that, there is a stigma about a man asking for help.
Yeah.
That is something that is sinister. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I have found myself in that position many times. And one of the toughest things that I have had to do as a head of a corporation, I mean, we're running hundreds of millions of dollars of corporations underneath you, and is to show a sign of weakness. Because the moment that you do that, people start looking at you funny. They start thinking, is this the right person to lead the organization? So what I wanted to do with the show was essentially just talk to the regular man, that and communicate the idea that if you're losing your mind, if you feel sad, if you feel overwhelmed and depressed, or you don't know where the next bill is going to come from, or you're pissed off with the parking enforcement officer from Oakville that gave you a parking ticket, and you want to lose your mind, you're not alone. Yeah. And there is this idea that there is a perfect life that we pursue, but when you peel the layers back, Lou, life is suffering, man.
100%.
And a lot of people think that they see Instagram and they see all the bling and the things and the money and the booty and the cleavage and the abs, and there is a standard that is being accepted as true, that is the farthest thing from it. And
Yeah.
I wanted to dig a little bit into that.
Yeah, and see, this is, I love when you go into this stuff, because I know you and I are both a big, well, I don't know if you're a big fan, but I'm a fan, and I think you're a fan as well, of Jordan Peterson. And he always, I mean, this is a big topic, and I think this is the reality. I mean, with what I do dealing with chronic pain and those types of issues, the reality is that there's this idea somehow that happened, I don't know when it happened, but it's relatively new, I think, in the history of humanity, where life's supposed to be just perfect, where there shouldn't ever be anything bad, that it should be easy, and that the minute it gets hard, that's not the right way for it to be, and there's got to be a quick solution. But I mean, one of the things that is consistently shown up in human history, and I think Jordan Peterson does a really good job of describing it, is life is sort of suffering. That's the sort of the point of it. It's not supposed to be easy, and there's going to be tough things. And I think what you're doing to help people find that, and find a safe place where they can at the very least listen, sharing ideas with people, I think that's a great thing. And it's sad that more people aren't considering that really life is not meant to be perfect.
Well, I think that commenting or adding on to the Jordan Peterson commentary there, he is certainly a philosophical and thought leader for me. I started to follow him quite a few years ago, and I've seen him personally at a few lectures, and the man has the shit figured out, Lou.
He does.
He's brilliant.
Yeah,
and unfortunately he's sick right now, and I think that in the middle of this mess that we find ourselves in, we need some thought leaders to come in and inject some common sense right now. And I never knew how much I needed him and his ideas until he stopped communicating. And I certainly hope that he's well, and I certainly hope that he comes back and shares some of his wisdom with us. But the reality is this, man, that the more we fool ourselves into thinking that perfection is the only way of life, the more we fail to see the reality of what's happening in the inside, and losing purpose, pursuing an unachievable state, a state of perfection, is where you will find depression, you will find unhappiness. See, I've always believed this, that the basis of unhappiness is comparison. And
right.
Especially when you're comparing yourself to an unattainable model. It's impossible to achieve perfection, right? And Jordan Peterson says it all the time. The only person that you should be comparing yourself to is you yesterday.
That's right.
Are you better than yesterday? What are you doing to provide a better version of yourself to the world? And I think that the show for me, Lou, it's been fascinating, because although, and I was trying to process this thought this morning. I grew up in Chile, and I was born in 1971. We had just come out of the only legally elected communist country that South America had ever seen. It was the government of Salvador Allende, and the country was just a disaster. In 1971, the military dictatorship came and took over the country. So we went from communism to a fascist government. So it was the both end
one
of the
extreme to the
spectrum.
other.
And I can tell you, the political spectrum is not a straight line; it's a circle. They meet on the other side, because a lot of the things that were very, very corrosive and nocive to society through communism, you would find them in the same way on the other side. So there was not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have found the most difficult thing to deal with, Lou, is censorship. A lot of people are not interested in having real conversation. They're not.
No.
In the moment that you say something that doesn't fall within the narrative of the day, you will be censored, but not in a benign, friendly way. Not in an attempt to discuss an idea and have a mental sparring as to which idea is better thought out or better researched. It's more so, what you're saying is offending me. You need to be shut down. You need to lose your job. You need to lose your company. You need to be taken off the air because what you're saying is not something that pleases me.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying, Lou, for me. Terrifying.
Have you ever read Douglas Murray, The Madness of Crowds?
Of course.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like, that's exactly, and for anybody listening, I highly recommend that book, because it's the idea of these identity politics and censorship, which it's crazy to me because, again, all these people that understand this understand that what happened at the turn of the 19th century with censorship led to a lot of problems that we had at that time. And I think we're moving that way again, where there's all this censorship. And I agree with you. Really, what it should be about is debate. Whether someone is right or wrong, you should be able to have a debate with someone, present idea, present scientific evidence, find a common ground. If you're censoring that, I actually, and Douglas Murray makes this argument that when you do that, you're actually giving those people power, because then they will find other methods to try to get those horrible ideas out, because some of them are just horrible ideas. But there's a certain level of importance of hearing those horrible ideas and discussing them. That way, you're not closing them off and they're building their own group of people and their own following with these crazy ideas. And they're saying, oh, look, we're being censored, so this is the way we need to react. And I think it's a very sad thing. And I don't think we're learning from history, because if we look back in history, it's there.
It is absolutely there. And one of the worst things that we can do to people with violent and shitty ideas is to suppress them. You know why? Because the ideas are still there. It's just that you don't know now when they're going to stab you from the darkness.
That's right.
It was, if we can discuss books on this, and we can do this for a long time, because this is fascinating. If you read Ayn Rand, Anthem, then you read Orwell's 19...
I got it right back there.
So when we read this and we understand the whole concept of hiding and suppressing ideas, suppressing human nature, you're not correcting the problem. No. You're just making the ideas subversive. And if you cannot have a genuine conversation and disagree on something, then what you're doing is you're scaring, you using fear to generate a consensus. And that is not consensus. So Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, had a famous line by saying, crocs are easy. They want to hunt you, they want to kill you, and they want to eat you. He says humans are more difficult. Some of them pretend to be your friend.
And they still want to do the same.
That line is fascinating, especially when right now, if your ideas don't fall within the narrative of the powers that are in place right now, you are being suppressed. You are being suppressed. And for some reason, both sides, the left and the right, are attacking each other to a way that if you have any sort of right-leaning ideology, you are being discarded as a human, like completely. 100%. And that's not true. Because let me give you an example. I'm a businessman. I am extremely fiscal conservative. But when it comes to social aspects, sleep with who you want. I don't care. Love doesn't have any sex. You want to marry. You want to marry. It doesn't matter who you want to marry. It doesn't matter who you want to sleep with. It has no relevance on me. That's your business.
100%.
And I do believe that we keep allowing the government to have more and more say into our thinking, and that by and large is giving us less and less power to make our own individual decisions. And right now it appears that defending your individual liberal rights has become a conservative idea, not a liberal idea, which is a contradiction. Very ironic.
Two points. Number one, just sort of on a tangent, and I don't know if you found this, and it's been a while since I read Anthem, but I think it's the second last chapter is probably one of the most powerful chapters. Chapter 11. When I read that, I must have read it 3 or 4 times in a row because of how powerful it was. So we could talk about that in a second, but I thought I couldn't remember if it was chapter 11. Do you have a point on that?
I want you to hear this. I'm here. I stand here on the summit of a mountain, my hands, I have memorized the chapter. It's just so unbelievably powerful. And I think that the whole concept of the I and the we is something that a lot of people don't understand. And also, it is unbelievable how much ignorance young people have today in history. Because
100%.
You have to remember that the Berlin Wall, I mean, conceptually ended the end of the Second World War, if you know what I'm saying. The Cold War started from there, and until then there were two unbelievable
separate worlds,
separate sides. A lot of people today were born after that. I think it was what was it, 1990 or 1992?
91, 92, somewhere around there, which is not that long ago.
So I think that history has been lost.
Yeah.
And many people are associating um, certain political tendencies with equality.
Yeah.
And once you start digging not too deep into the books of time, you'll understand that history, some may say that was written by the victors,
Yeah.
but we are close enough now to those episodes in history that you can understand and draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, and I think this is where people need to go back and read these types of things. And I mean, Ayn Rand and George Orwell are two great examples of authors that lived through a certain time and saw all this stuff happening around them. And I mean, I remember when I first read Anthem, and you start reading that book, I didn't even know what was going on initially, because I was like, what the, like, it's going, I was like, this person sounds like they're talking in first person, but everything's referred to in third person. Like, what the heck's going on here? It was such a strange book. But then as you got into it and as you get through, you start to, and it's so powerful, because I mean, I was relatively young, I think, when I read that, and I didn't really understand all that much about politics, but it's definitely helped me to frame my mentality around understanding politics and censorship. And I think it's an important thing. I really think not enough people are looking back, and I don't think enough people read. I know you and I are both love to read, so I think that's another thing that we have in common. And there's so much knowledge out there in books, and the fact that people don't take advantage of that. Again, it's another one of those examples how we started. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's all there. It's all in those books.
For me, a big bone to pick, a big bone that I have to pick with, society today is the following: that in the history of mankind, Lou, never, ever, ever we have had the resources of the entire planet, of the entire human race, in a little tiny device
I
here.
know. Yeah.
And never before we have
Crazy.
used it less for us to educate ourselves. And I do believe that there are two types of people: the ones that want to know and the ones that want to believe.
Yeah.
Also, you can expand that into the people that want to be educated and the want to be entertained. And
Right.
if I'm given the choice, my choice is very clear. I have no choice. I will always seek to be educated. I will always seek to know. I don't want to believe anything. In fact, you see, for those of you who don't know, I'm covered in tattoos, and if when I wear a suit, I can hide all of this, right? Because it's still not completely socially acceptable that an executive of a $300 million company is covered in tattoos. Well, I don't give a shit, and that's a wonderful thing to say here. But I have it tattooed on me. The saying "de omnibus dubitandum," which means question everything, doubt everything, find your own conclusions, seek your own answers. No one is going to tell me what to believe. In our society is breeding activists, is not breeding students of life. And I don't believe this. I don't believe. I refuse to think that today's youth doesn't have the I would say the self-awareness to say, maybe there is another way. Maybe I shouldn't be making Kim Kardashian or Kanye West a billionaire. Maybe I shouldn't be buying that Drake hat that costs $100 for something. Maybe I don't need to confuse fame with importance. And on that basis, we don't have a lot of friends, Lou.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. And it sort of ties in, the point of me doing what I'm doing now is also to focus on the COVID thing. And I think that ties into something that we were speaking about before we decided to do this. But and the example is, I had somebody that I know talk about, and we were 2 weeks into the COVID thing, and they posted messages saying that, they were going to be homeless because they were about to be laid off. And I know the way this person lives. They have all the fancy things. They do all the things that, and Ray Dalio, who is the principal of Bridgewater Associates, and he's sort of a mentor of mine in terms of leadership. One of the things that he talked about recently was that this, in a way, is sort of also an awakening, because for so long, the people post-World War II, that generation of people, understood that sometimes you need to have savings. You need to plan for the unexpected, because we don't know when that could come about. we have been spoiled. And I was raised in a way where we had that mentality that you always had to be planning for the unexpected. And so when I hear people after 2 weeks of a pandemic say that you're going to be homeless and you're going to have lost everything, to me, there's a bigger problem. I'm not saying that COVID is okay and whatever, but I'm thinking if you're already in the point where if anything could have happened that could have derailed you within 2 weeks and you're about to lose everything, you have a foundational problem. You don't have a COVID problem.
Well, if 2 weeks worth of unemployment, if 1 or 2 paychecks are enough to derail the entire financial system in the country, the question that I ask is the following: did we have a good economy in the first place?
That's right. Yeah.
Because if that's how close we are to financial doom, think of how stretched Canadians have been all along. And I say this on the show all the time. One of the toughest things that I have is at my shop anyways, where I work, is to convince someone that they're spending too much money on a car. Now, do you need to do this? Do you need to have a 7-passenger vehicle when you are by yourself 90% of the time? And people look at me as if I have 3 heads. But I think that we have enjoyed so many years of prosperity, Lou, that we have become desensitized to the whole concept of, and it's funny because whenever I have things that speak to me, I put them on my body, is I have a problem. And there is also another saying that is the omnibus dubitandum. That is the one that I talked to you earlier, but si vis pacem per bellum stands for to secure peace is to prepare for war. And that in all sense of the word. If the economy shuts down and you don't have some cash available to you, you're doomed.
Yeah. You
are doomed. And people are walking that line on the financial edge so aggressively every day that they are perfectly fine. The only time that people budget, Lou, is when they reach the limit of their credit card. And all of a sudden, no, I can't spend anymore.
I know.
You cannot. I think that we have become desensitized to the idea of luxury as well. You see, back in the day, you needed to look after your fundamentals. Your house needed to be paid off. You needed to have no loans or debts. And only then you would take some liberties, like, for example, going on an all-inclusive vacation. I can tell you this, Lou. I left Chile when I was 17. In those 17 years, I never once went out to eat at a restaurant. My family was that poor.
Right.
I didn't know what that meant. And if we ever actually, no, there were no fast food restaurants in Chile. And believe it or not, there was not a lot of overweight people there either. But we never did that. And a treat would be when one of my distant cousins or uncles would show up with ice cream.
Wow.
And we would eat ice cream, or a French baguette, like the long French baguettes. That was a treat for us. So, this whole concept of going out for dinner every single day of the week or every other day of the week, when you start analyzing the amount of waste that is produced, but also the economy right now is shutting down because people are only buying the necessities. Think about this for a second.
Yeah.
Right now, people are only buying what they need. And look what's happening to the world. They're not buying cars. They're not buying restaurant meals. They're not buying clothes. They're not buying trips. Right now, we're living on the essentials, and the whole world economy is shut down. So what do you think that the motivation is of the system to make you not spend your money?
I know.
The system is rigged.
Yeah.
We have been conditioned to be consumers, not citizens, consumers. That's all we are. And once we understand that, we are going to start making better decisions. And I think that right now, this is a big awakening, Lou. If you come out of this quarantine, if you come out of this economic downturn and you haven't been qualified on something new, if you haven't learned a new skill, or you haven't picked up any lessons, then you have a bigger problem than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, it goes back to that foundational thing. And one of the other things, and I feel bad saying it, but you brought up the point there of Chile when you were still there. There's parts in the world right now that live this way and worse still every single day. There are millions, billions of people around the world that this is just their everyday existence. The idea of some disease that could kill them poverty, no luxuries. This is the reality. You're right. We are spoiled, especially in the Western world, especially in North America, and the culture that's been developed around us and that we've all accepted, that we sit there and we think, yeah, you've got to have this car. You've got to wear this type of hat. You've got, and who do we put on pedestals? We put on pedestals, not these thought leaders, but people who just contribute to that problem, like the Kim Kardashians and the things that you mentioned. It's crazy that there isn't this awakening, and I hope this does move a lot of people towards that.
But look at it this way, Lou. When I mean, throughout the years, I have managed several companies, and often I would find, you know, a general labor person, you know, a receptionist, you know, somebody that was in the lower income bracket of a company, showing up to work with a $3,000 purse.
I've had that happen before. I can't believe you brought up that example, but keep going. It's
What's
crazy.
that?
I've had the exact same thing happen in my company, where people that would be in that lower tax bracket, socioeconomic status, who I know exactly what they're making because we pay them. And then all of a sudden they're showing up with a purse that would have been the equivalent of a full month's amount of work is crazy.
It's more than that. I've done this several times for my people, because when anyone that has ever been part of one of my sales meetings, I don't like to talk about sales. You know, I want to make my people better people, and I'm not saying that I'm a better person. I'm just saying that I'm awake and I know how much I don't know. And I think that right there puts me at an advantage, because I will read more, I will investigate more, and I try to get myself expanded. So one of the things that I do is I always ask, you know, if you had to put a number, you're looking at that is after tax money. So if you are, because you're in a lower tax bracket, you're in a 30% tax bracket, let's say that you had to earn $5,000 in order for you to buy that purse. Now, how many actual hours did you need to work in order for you to earn $5,000? Are we talking 3 months? Are we talking about 400 or 500 hours? So that's how many hours of your life you gave up for something that, what does it mean? It means nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to me how people have started to use things to increase their own value to themselves. We are so unhappy in the inside, Lou, that we just keep looking for shots of dopamine when we buy things. And you know, that has the same chemical reaction that drugs has. And sex will have in you. You buy something, boom, you feel good. You buy something, boom, you feel good. But it doesn't take long until you are completely depressed and you cannot buy your way into happiness.
100%. Yeah.
You cannot do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's very good research that even shows the idea of that people associate money with happiness. There's very good research that shows that, I mean, obviously, if you're living in extreme poverty, money will help to an extent to get you out of those things. But the threshold is about $70,000 per family per year is the amount of money that contributes to happiness. And any more after that, there is no contribution to your happiness. In fact, at a certain point, you almost start to fall off over the edge and go back the other way because of how much you start to, it's almost like you've beat the game. When you make so much money that you get to a point where it would be like playing a video game that's just too easy for you, right? And that's why you see so much levels of depression in all these people. And we often look at these multimillionaires and billionaires and hear of the depressions that they suffer in these things. And the average person will wonder, well, what do they even have to be depressed about? They're depressed because they realize what anybody over $70,000 of income a year will realize. Money's not going to contribute any more to making you happier.
And you know, the interesting thing, Lou, is that a lot of people don't run their household finances like a business. So let me explain. You know, during an economic downturn, you need there are some basic principles that you need to abide by when it comes to business. Number one, you need to protect the financial integrity of the company. You need to increase your liquidity, and also you need to cut your expenses. Boom. That's 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
So now, as a business, you start cutting at your expenses. Do I need to have this system? Do I need to have this coffee? Do I need to have this cleaning company because I could clean it myself? Do I need to have all these things? And then you go back into the essentials. Then, do I need to rent this property? Do I need to buy this additional stock? Do I need to do all of these things? No, I don't. All right, how much money now do we have in the bank? So this is what happens when people start expanding and they grow into the amount of money that they're making. What they don't know is that they are increasing the fixed operational cost. The bigger the house, the bigger the payments. The bigger the payments, the bigger the exposure. So next thing you know, they ask me, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a car salesperson. They immediately doubt me. They immediately doubt me.
Yeah.
But if I go to the same party and somebody asks me, Greg, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a Canadian Army vet. And there's like, oh, thank you for your service. You know, let's
Right.
talk to you. You're an interesting,
Yeah.
trustworthy person.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same person. It's just the perception. And unfortunately, whenever you have guys like you and I that run businesses, for some reason, there is this idea that people that own businesses are all evil and we all want to get profit and profiteer. You know, I put an ad on social media a little while ago in which I said, if one of my service bays helps one doctor or one nurse to get to one patient, I will remain open. And the amount of heat, Lou, that I've received on that post,
Yeah.
honestly, man, it's like, are you serious? Do you have any concept of how a car dealership works?
Yeah.
You know, if I were to shut the entire operation down, I lose less money than if I have a few people working on the store. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. We're in a similar place with what we do is mainly elective procedures. And so we can still operate for emergencies and urgent care and things like that. And I actually had somebody quit because that's what we're doing. I followed the mandate of the government. And I had somebody quit because they essentially said, like, this is ridiculous. Other businesses are closed. We should be closed. And I've said, but have you ever considered if someone hurts their back, for example, and they are in dire straits and they can't do anything, would you rather that person sees us where we can control it in a community, in an out clinic, an outpatient setting? Or do you want them going to an emergency room, taking up the emergency room's time, dealing with low back pain when they're probably going to be dealing with respiratory illnesses? And do you want them exposed to that environment? Simple. To me, it's simple.
Well, to you, because you have dedicated a tremendous amount of time to grow your intellectual side, the intellectual side of your brain, to look at things logically. You know, does this make sense? You know, is this something that we should do? And look, you know, I completely understand what you're saying on your side. From our side, it's even more difficult to justify.
Yeah.
Simply because car dealerships, unfortunately, and I will spend the rest of my living years, Lou, trying to remove the reputation that dealerships have. Unfortunately, some dealers go really out of their way to contribute to that crappy reputation. But car dealerships are filled with people like you and I. They are filled with our brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and friends. Those are the people that work in car dealerships. They're not any different than you and I.
No.
But a lot of people think that dealerships staying open right now is a problem, and that we are being you know, self-serving, and that we are we're contributing to the problem, not to the solution. The reality is this, folks, that the financial implication of this COVID-19 situation is going to be far greater than the actual virus itself. And you watch, Lou, you watch. We are going to be paying for this for a very, very, very long time. For a very long time.
It's interesting when a lot of the things we're talking about is really, there's a transference. Like I've found it interesting, and maybe this is a little bit of wisdom on my part, but I found it interesting that when you look at life, the things that happen at a microscopic level happen at a human level, happen at a macroeconomic level. That same thing that we were talking about, finances with the individuals, applies to governments. And I've had the opportunity to speak with a few politicians. And one of the things that we've talked about is this, like, what's happening right now. And I think all levels of government have done an incredible job to step up to help, because I mean, the situation is horrible and they're trying to figure out where's the balance. But the reality is all of this money is not just in thin air. It's someone's going to have to pay for it. And you know who's paying for it? Our future selves. That's who's going to pay for it. Our future selves.
You know, I quoted Milton Friedman yesterday on my show, and that gets a lot of people really, really upset. But I'm going to quote him again. You know, Milton Friedman said, quote, "The moment you commit yourself to do good with other people's money is the moment that you commit yourself to the use of force. Because before you do good with other people's money, you first need to take it away from
Right.
those people.
Right.
End of quote. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand, folks. When we are using our own future dollars to pay for something that we don't know yet, and the reality is this, that the amount of money that's getting pumped into the economy right now, for the most part, is not landing in the citizens' pockets. It's not. It's landing somewhere else. And you need to, when you need to understand this, you need to follow the money. I don't want to be the guy, but there are so many things that don't make sense right now that I simply don't have the scope to even begin to explain what I feel at this point. All I know is that the world will not be the same after this. It will
No.
not be the same. And I see it in all the small businesses, Lou. Like, for example, restaurants.
Yeah.
Restaurants are not going to make it. I mean, if they didn't have the liquidity to sustain this mess, they're done.
Yeah.
They are done.
Yeah.
And now, when the government tells you you need to shut down your business, whether you like it or not, you need to shut it down. And you have your life savings. You have 20, 30 years worth of effort in building this little tiny company that is, I can also see it on my jiu-jitsu school, Lou. The jiu-jitsu school is shut down.
Yeah.
How long do you think it's going to be until somebody gets comfortable having someone on top of them breathing and coughing in their mouth? Because that's what we do. We just fight each other, right?
Yeah.
Gyms. So I think that the financial repercussions of this, we're gonna go into a depression, but I'm talking into an actual mental depression.
Yeah.
There will be people depressed on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to be very, very careful in how that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Because in history, we have never really sacrificed the many to protect the few. It's always been the other way around.
The other way. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and right now, these are unprecedented times, man.
Yeah.
Unprecedented times. They asked me, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a car salesperson." They immediately doubt me. They immediately doubt me.
Yeah.
But if I go to the same party and somebody asks me, "Greg, what do you do for a living?" I said, "Well, I'm a Canadian Army vet," and there's like, "Oh, thank you for your service. Let's talk to you. You're an interesting, trustworthy person."
Yeah.
It's the same person. It's just the perception. And unfortunately, whenever you have guys like you and I that run businesses, for some reason, there is this idea that people that own businesses are all evil and we all want to get profit and profiteer. I put an ad on social media a little while ago in which I said, if one of my service bays helps one doctor or one nurse to get to one patient, I will remain open. And the amount of heat, Lou, that I've received on that post, honestly, man, it's like, are you serious? Do you have any concept of how a car dealership works?
Yeah.
If I were to shut the entire operation down, I lose less money than if I have a few people working on the store. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. We're in a similar place with what we do is mainly elective procedures. And so we can still operate for emergencies and urgent care and things like that. And I actually had somebody quit because that's what we're doing. I followed the mandate of the government. And I had somebody quit because they essentially said, like, this is ridiculous. Other businesses are closed. We should be closed. And I've said, but have you ever considered if someone hurts their back, for example, and they are in dire straits and they can't do anything, would you rather that person sees us where we can control it in a community, in an outpatient setting? Or do you want them going to an emergency room, taking up the emergency room's time, dealing with low back pain when they're probably going to be dealing with respiratory illnesses? And do you want them exposed to that environment? Simple. To me, it's simple.
Well, to you, because you have dedicated a tremendous amount of time to grow your intellectual side, the intellectual side of your brain, to look at things logically. Does this make sense? Is this something that we should do? And look, I completely understand what you're saying on your side. From our side, it's even more difficult to justify.
Yeah.
Simply because car dealerships, unfortunately, and I will the rest of my living years, Lou, trying to remove the reputation that dealerships have. Unfortunately, some dealers go really out of their way to contribute to that crappy reputation. But car dealerships are filled with people like you and I. They are filled with our brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and friends. Those are the people that work in car dealerships. They're not
Yeah.
any different than you and I.
No.
But a lot of people think that dealerships staying open right now is a problem, and that we are being self-serving, and that we are helping, we're contributing to the problem, not to the solution. The reality is this, folks, that the financial implication of this COVID-19 situation is going to be far greater than the actual virus itself. And you watch, Lou, you watch. We are going to be paying for this for a very, very, very long time. For a very long time.
It's interesting when a lot of the things we're talking about is really, there's a transference. Like I've found it interesting, and maybe this is a little bit of wisdom on my part, but I found it interesting that when you look at life, the things that happen at a microscopic level happen at a human level, happen at a macroeconomic level. That same thing that we were talking about, finances with the individuals, applies to governments. And I've had the opportunity to speak with a few politicians. And one of the things that we've talked about is this, like, what's happening right now. And I think all levels of government have done an incredible job to step up to help, because I mean, the situation is horrible and they're trying to figure out where's the balance. But the reality is all of this money is not just in thin air. It's someone's going to have to pay for it. And you know who's paying for it? Our future selves. That's who's going to pay for it, our future selves.
You know, I quoted Milton Friedman yesterday on my show, and that gets a lot of people really, really upset. But I'm going to quote him again. Milton Friedman said, quote, "The moment you commit yourself to do good with other people's money is the moment that you commit yourself to the use of force. Because before you do good with other people's money, you first need to take it away from those people." End of quote. And it's something that a lot of people don't understand, folks. When we are using our own future dollars to pay for something that we don't know yet, and the reality is this, that the amount of money that's getting pumped into the economy right now, for the most part, is not landing in the citizens' pockets. It's not. It's landing somewhere else. And you need to, when you need to understand this, you need to follow the money. I don't want to be the guy, but there are so many things that don't make sense right now that I simply don't have the scope to even begin to explain what I feel at this point. All I know is that the world will not be the same after this. It will not be the same. And I see it in all the small businesses, Lou. Like, for example, restaurants. Restaurants are not going to make it. I mean, if they didn't have the liquidity to sustain this mess, they're done. They are done. And now, when the government tells you you need to shut down your business, whether you like it or not, you need to shut it down. And you have your life savings. You have 20, 30 years worth of effort in building this little tiny company that is, I can also see it on my jiu-jitsu school, Lou. The jiu-jitsu school is shut down. How long do you think it's going to be until somebody gets comfortable having someone on top of them breathing and coughing in their mouth? Because that's what we do. We just fight each other, right? Gyms. So I think that the financial repercussions of this, we're gonna go into a depression, but I'm talking into an actual mental depression. There will be people depressed on the other side. And I think that we need to be very, very careful in how that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because in history, we have never really sacrificed the many to protect the few. It's always been the other way around.
That's right.
And right now, these are unprecedented times, man. Unprecedented times. And for me, I can tell you, I'm terrified.
Me too.
I'm terrified because do I know what the future brings? No. All I know is that I'm sitting in $22 million worth of product on ground, and the supply, the demand chain has been cut off, but it hasn't been cut off for me. It's been cut off by the government. So in the history of times, never once a government has said the economy needs to shut down. We're going to shut it out. All these years of prosperity, fuck it. Let's throw it out the window. Let's just do it intentionally. We are going to intentionally put the country into trouble. Now, you may say, well, we need to save lives. I get it.
Yeah.
But there are other side of the consequences. So the law of unintended consequences. Are we prepared for those consequences? And I don't think we are.
No. And it's interesting. This, again, ties back to what we were talking about a second ago. Well, maybe more than a second. But around the world right now, as soon as you have a politician or a country who wants to try to look at this in another way and say, hey, well, let's we can't just shut down forever. Let's look at the economy and let's understand this. They're immediately criticized and lambasted all across that they're evil, that they don't care. And it's crazy because it's more than just caring. Like, this has to be a balancing act. You have to try to save as many lives as possible. Yes, I agree. I'm in healthcare. I absolutely agree with that. But at the same time, there are consequences to people shutting down the economy that potentially, as you've said, as many people have said, the consequences to overall health may be even greater. As an example that I think of with what we do, I've been talking to my colleagues in hospital settings, the emergency rooms. Less and less people right now are presenting to emergency rooms with acute emergencies such as heart attacks, strokes, appendicitis. The incidence of that did not decrease. Those things are still happening. Those people are not going because we've instilled so much fear into them that they're not even taking care of their health. And that's killing them. That's a death related to all of this. By shutting things down, by creating an environment like this, there are people who are having strokes, heart attacks, who are dying and are not noticing the early symptoms, which are often very benign, subtle. And in any other environment, they might have said, you know what? I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to go to a clinic. I'm going to go get checked out. In this environment, the fear of even stepping outside of your house, they're saying, no, this isn't that bad. It's just a little bit of pain. I'm going to stay home. Next morning, they're dead.
Well, you got to remember this, Lou, that, fear is just a way to control. It's always been the same.
Yeah.
And this brings me back. Look, I do think that that the government is doing whatever they have to do right now.
Absolutely.
But if you ask most people prior to COVID-19 whether they trusted the government to make decisions for them, I would tell you that unequivocally, most people would say absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why has that changed overnight? Why do you feel differently? Why are we relying on Big Brother to make the decisions for you? Now, I do believe that there's a lot of morons out there that it doesn't matter what you tell them, they're going to do something silly anyway.
Of course.
So I get that.
Yeah.
But I do believe that somehow we are losing a lot of civil liberties and that we're not even paying attention to this. I think that at some point we need to be treating citizens like adults. I'm a 48-year-old businessman. I'm an adult. I can make my decisions.
Yeah.
Make the recommendations. If something happens to me, it was my choice.
Yeah.
But right now, I can't take the kids to the park because somebody is going to come too close to you and you may get yourself into trouble. But I got some report that I read this morning that's saying that a lot of people in the healthcare business in the United States are getting laid off.
Yeah,
because
they are.
They're empty.
Yeah, they're well. Even the hospitals here, I keep it obviously in close contact with all of my colleagues. We have some of our clinics that are affiliated with hospitals. Like they're operating at 50% capacity. They've never been slower. Like it's crazy. They've got all kinds of time. And yeah, in the States, it's especially sad that even a lot of nurses are being laid off because there's just no demand for it right now. And this is, in this podcast already, I've spoken to numerous healthcare experts where we've talked about the long-term health implications of this. For sure, this is going to change a lot of things. Like there are people who, again, were scheduled for elective surgeries for things that are not being done. I had somebody call me who completely tore their bicep at 80 years old and was unwilling to go into the emergency room so that they could get it reattached. What's the long-term consequence to an 80-year-old who now can't use his dominant arm for the rest of his life? It's potentially life-threatening. Like it's crazy.
Yesterday, I love quotes.
Yeah.
For the same reason that you said earlier, that sometimes we don't need to reinvent anything. Sometimes some of the best, tidbits of wisdom have already been written. And Mark Twain said, whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect.
Yeah.
And
That's a great
think
quote.
that right now, we seem to be at the right moment for us to take a pause and reflect on what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Although I completely respect that saving lives should be the number one priority,
Of
I
course.
don't think that we are assessing all the collateral damage that this is going to do to Canadians and people around the world. I mean, Canadians right now have been so close to the financial edge of doom that right now you're gonna see a lot of the inefficiencies. You're gonna see a lot of the weaknesses of our system. You're gonna see a lot of the problems, the deep-rooted problems that we have as a society of overspending, of under savings. I mean, you ask most people, do you have a financial advisor? And they'll tell you, no, I don't.
No. Yeah.
Are you planning to retire? He says, I don't know. Really?
I know. It's crazy.
We've never lived this long.
Yeah.
We right now, what is it? The average age in Canada is 85 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Around there.
Do
Yeah.
you have enough money to last you that
Yeah,
long? And people don't pay any attention. They pay more attention to their Netflix account than they do to their savings account, which is how misguided and how much focus we have lost. I think that we are in a need of some thought leaders that are going to come back and just give us a shake and say, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Like, and this is, I'm talking in the figurative sense. We need a shakeup, and maybe I'm trying to find a silver lining in this mess, because this is a real big mess, Lou. And if the silver lining is that we are, life is giving you a shake and saying, wake up, wake up. Are you actually as good as you thought you were? Are you as safe as you thought you were? Are you as solvent as you thought you were? Are you as famous, or are you as rich, or are you as financially secure as you pretend to be? Every day, Lou, I look out my front window and I see Mercedes and Land Rovers and Audis just parked on the street 100% of the time. And I can tell you that those people are paying $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 a month on a car that's just sitting on the driveway, collecting water and dust.
Yeah.
Was it necessary?
Yeah.
Is it necessary? What do you think it's going to take until we learn the lesson, Lou?
Who knows what it'll be? I think I think the interesting thing about life is that the people who are going to learn the lesson already knew the lesson. And there's another thing my dad used to say, and when you translate it, because my dad spoke Italian, it's essentially that a wolf will shed its fur but never its habits. And it's an interesting thing, because I think guys like you and I, we're just this mindset. And then there's other people that, after 2-3 months of going back to some level of normal, they just go back to the same bullshit that they've been doing, because they don't use, you brought up a quote about reflection and pain. I again, going back to Ray Dalio, one of the sections in his book called Principles, and the direct title of it is Pain plus Reflection equals Progress. And it's incredible how many people don't focus on that in their lives. They don't take the opportunities. You will do more reflecting and more learning in times of failures, in times of pain, than you will when things are good. And it's just sad that people often don't pay attention to those things. And I think that's the difference why some people that go through levels of pain and problems can progress and go the right way, and why some people fall off and go the other way. I think it's a mindset. I hope it's an awakening. There's so many different ways. I hope this is an awakening in terms of the way people run healthcare, and which is specific to what I do, but even in general, the way people take care of themselves. I mean, one of the things we've seen with this virus is comorbidities are one of the things that lead to more serious illness. So just the simple fact that if you're overall healthier, and a lot of the comorbidities are lifestyle things like high blood pressure, insulin resistance, obesity, these are not things that just happen. These are things where you can have a control every single day. Things like smoking cigarettes, right? People who smoke cigarettes, there's a worse outcome if you get COVID-19. Well, that shouldn't come as a surprise, because there's a worse outcome for every health thing that you can imagine. If you are obese, if you have hypertension, if you smoke, like, these are things that it's like, people have been telling you this all the time. Try to be as healthy as possible for when the unknown happens. And that's the idea of these habits that you create in one area of life, transfer to other areas of life as well.
Well, look at it this way. I mean, some of the top, I think it's the top 4 or 5 leading causes of death in North America right now are habitual diseases. Yeah. Something that you create yourself. Yeah. And you create it yourself because you do something too much.
Yes.
Like you eat too much sugar. What are you you're gonna have diabetes. You eat, too much, period. You're gonna get vascular
problems.
Broken, die. Yeah. You don't exercise enough, you're gonna get a heart attack. You smoke too much, you're gonna get lung cancer. And when you start thinking about doing something too much, it's because often we're looking for that high. We are so deeply unhappy, Lou, that we're trying to eat our way into happiness. We are trying to drink our pop our way into happiness. We're trying to smoke our way into happiness. And seeking that high, seeking that feeling is making us sick.
Yeah.
As a society, we have lost purpose, man. We have lost purpose. And I can tell you, the moment that you lose purpose is when you become depressed, you become unhappy. And I can tell you from personal experience right now, our society is great. The problem is this: it's when you make it too easy to be alive, it's when you lose purpose. It's too easy.
Yeah.
You go to the most poverty-ridden countries on the planet, man, and you're gonna see people dancing and singing and getting together and having a glass of wine in the front lawn. Here, I've lived in the same house for 3 years and I don't know my neighbors.
Yeah.
We're all trapped inside. Why? Because we're tied in this machine. We need this machine, this concept of production. All we need to do is to produce and produce some more. And then after that, you need to produce some more. And we are producing a lot of unhappiness right now. We need to inject some meaning, guys.
Yeah.
That's the reason why Jordan Peterson is so important.
I was going to say, we started with that, and I think we've gone so many different places. We should almost end with that idea that you're right. It's just the idea, if we go back to realizing that really life is about some level of suffering, unfairness, whatever it is. And if we can take that and actually accept it instead of thinking that it's just supposed to be perfect, then all of a sudden, those moments when you can genuinely be happy, and that example you gave is so true, where you look at these other places in the world and they know everybody and they're always having a good time, and you stop and wonder, how can they be so happy? Because they've realized something, that in those moments when you can have that true happiness, you should take full advantage of it. When you're living in sort of this daze where everything is so good, you never really find the appreciation. And maybe that's the whole point of this thing, that there's some level of suffering so that when it's good, you can just take full advantage of it and have a great time.
Amen to that.
Amen.
It's been wonderful to have this conversation with you, Lou, and I really appreciate that you invited me to have a chat on a Sunday morning. I'm using my rowing machine right now, but I appreciate what you're trying to do. And I think that we, individually, we're all trying to have this, single, meaningful contribution to what's going on out there. But anytime, man, anytime you want to talk again, just let me know.
Thank you. Greg Carrasco from the Greg Carrasco Show on AM 640 Toronto, every Saturday at 8 o'clock. Listen up.